Hi, I'm Jack Brewer with Expanding Frontiers Research. In the post 9/11 world, activity increased at CIA black sites. In the coming years, images would leak of torture conducted under the guise of national security, while euphemisms like extraordinary rendition and enhanced interrogation techniques were widely implemented. Since the opening in 2002 of the Guantanamo Bay detention facility, 780 detainees are known to have been held. Some did not survive. Only 9 of the 780 were ever charged with a crime, and fewer still have been tried and convicted. 15 now remain, with the recent release of 12 prisoners. A number of Guantanamo detainees express themselves through art. This includes the metaphors of Sabri al-Qarashi, the self-portraits of CIA torture by Abu Zubaydah, and the landscapes of Abdul Malik, such as the painting of the sun on the horizon hanging over my shoulder. January 11th marks 23 years since the opening of the detention camps at Guantanamo. Cage International is recognizing 23 years of injustice with a call to action against torture and indefinite detention. My guest today, Mansoor Adayfi, is among the former detainees speaking during the event. Mr. Adayfi was just 19 years old when he was taken to Guantanamo, where he spent over 14 years detained without charges. He now lives in Belgrade, Serbia, where he writes, creates artwork, and advocates for prisoner and detainee rights. He is the author of the memoir, Don't Forget Us Here, Lost and Found at Guantanamo. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Adayfi. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack, for having me today. And it was nice to talk today. We have like some good news finally from Guantanamo, and to talk to the people about Guantanamo and the true story about Guantanamo. Because as you know, Guantanamo, one of the most secretive prison in the world. Secrecy is a way to control the narrative and shape people's opinions and way of thinking.
Yes, let's start with the recent news. 12 releases within the past week. How do you and your colleagues that advocate for prisoners and detainees interpret the latest circumstances?
Actually, we have recently 15 cases of release from Guantanamo. And those actually a good step toward the not closing the prison because we are not there, but it's kind of like emptying or releasing those prisoners who have been cleared to release. Some of the prisoners, some of these cases have been cleared in 2009 and 2010. And one of the cases, actually, the government noticed the Congress for release in 2011. Yet, after almost like over a decade, they got released. As it shows how the injustice of in Guantanamo and the lack of accountability and a lack of basic human rights, like a lack of there's no, I'm not going to talk about justice because Guantanamo itself was created outside of the justice. So we are so happy, and it was especially the families when I was talking to them yesterday, and like it was one of the best news for them because they have been waiting for years, for over 2 decades, to meet with their loved one, with their, mothers, daughters, wives. They all were waiting for their loved one, and that's good news indeed. But still, we have, as you know, there's still a lot of work need to be done about Guantanamo, especially those who deemed as forever prisoners, including Abu Zubaydah, one of the most tortured prisoners in the CIA history. And actually, they classify him along other two prisoners as forever prisoners, mean they are not going to try them or charge them or like to release them. So it's a big mess. When to come to Guantanamo, it's really, really big mess. But this kind of release, I hope Biden administration will do something about these cases and release at least those who have been cleared for release.
Yes, yes, and that is Mr. Bazaitu on over your one shoulder. And tell me about the images of the prisoners over your other shoulder.
Yeah, this image is those who have been cleared for release. We have been campaigning for everyone, like for in Guantanamo. I mean, like now almost everyone released in this photo except three. This is the Rohingya stateless man, a Libyan, and a Somali. All of them have been released except three. So you have been like, because we were advocating clear the 16, before a month ago, there were 16 cleared for release. Now they release almost 15. We still have three who have been cleared in this page. And like yesterday, just as you know, that 11 of these men was Yemenis were sent to Oman.
And
Because
when
as my job, as you know, like let me introduce myself. I'm Mansoor Adayfi, former Guantanamo prisoner. You can call me 441 Smiley Troublemaker. I work now for Cage International advocacy group based in UK. I work as Guantanamo Project Coordinator, and we have been actually campaigning for years and years for the closure of Guantanamo, release the prisoners, and also at the same time seeking accountability and justice. We are working on helping the prisoners at Guantanamo and those who have been released, like former Guantanamo prisoners and so on.
Yes, if I understand your story correctly, you were one of the first prisoners and you were held 14 years, never charged. And then is it correct that you were relocated to Serbia that you knew virtually nothing about when you went? Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So this is my story. You can say it in one sentence. So, I mean, yeah, I was one of the first group who arrived at Guantanamo 2002 and Camp X-ray. When we arrived there, as you know, at the beginning, that George W. Bush and his administration deemed us as the worst of the worst, vicious killers, terrorists, and so on. And at that time, you know, we had no lawyers. There was no media to really cover what was going on at Guantanamo. When we arrived there, we had no idea where we were or until we were going to stay at that place. So was only, and there was no the administration at that time, they had no idea how to treat us as prisoners. Like there was conflict between two generals, Mike Leonard and others. You know, Mike Leonard wanted to treat us as prisoners of war, but there was strong objection from other generals, from interrogation, and so on. So basically, it became, and Guantanamo intentionally was created outside of the legal system intentionally to keep people, to deprive people of their the basic of human rights. And until now, there is no rules applied at Guantanamo, neither United States law, neither a Geneva Convention, nor nothing, basically. When you are in Guantanamo, you have no right whatsoever. So we spent years and years. And in 2003, when General Jeffrey Miller arrived at Guantanamo, and as you know, I think all of you know who is General Jeffrey Miller. For those who don't know, General Jeffrey Miller is a war criminal who established he is the architect of Abu Ghraib, president in Iraq, And as you know, the first time when the images came out, the torture of the prisoners and the torture program and so on. So he started at Guantanamo developing or establishing the torture program, torturing us there. Then he moved to Iraq. So he was the first one who wrote the camp SOP, what they call it, standard operation procedures. Is the way how prisoners should be treated and how the camp should be run by any administration who come after him. So torture program in Guantanamo itself was turned into an experimenting lab on prisoners at Guantanamo. Even some of anyone who would dare to stand for humanity or to oppose the torture or the mistreatment at Guantanamo would face also the same fate like prisoners. And I remember one of the cases, an army captain, James Yee, he came to Guantanamo as a Muslim chaplain when he opposed General Jeffrey Miller, the torture and using the religion of a way of the desecration of the religion and used as a way to pressure the prisoners to confess. James C. himself was a victim. He was arrested. They put him in orange jumpsuit, and he was classified as an enemy combatant. And they put him in isolation for 76 days. Like, we were not the only victims of Guantanamo. There was many guards, camp staff, and anyone who dared to stick their humanity or to challenge the abuse, the torture at Guantanamo, they would be also punished. They will be demoted. They will be also kicked from Guantanamo. So I spent around 15 years at Guantanamo, from 2002 2010. We call it the Dark Age. And if you read the book, Don't Forget Us Here, you can see how I talked about the life in the prison, about the life, about the prisoners, about the guard, about the camp staff, about Guantanamo itself, how it started, how it's evolved, how it changed, and it changes people. So during George W. Bush, it was one of the worst times because the torture, the abuses, and 2006 was one of the worst years. And I met, as you see here, Ron DeSantis in 2006, and he was the legal advisor for the camp administration. At that time, we were on hunger strike and force feeding, and he was one of the people who actually were supervised the misuse of the force feeding and using the torture by using the force feeding as a way of torture.
Yes, I was aware that in 2022 you stated that Ron DeSantis observed brutal force feeding.
He admitted that in 2018, and I didn't know until I was interviewed by one of the Washington Post reporters, and he told me, as he sent me a video, he said yes, he admitted in 2018 when he was interviewed by Vice News that he gave advices about how using the force feeding as a way of to break the hunger strike, because he believes that our hunger strike was a form of jihad. And like as I told you, anything we did at that time was used against us, and they took us, they already in their mentality, in their mind, like, you guys are terrorists, you're the worst order, that's it, you're not innocent. And like, we challenged them, we said, look, what crime have we committed, and try us. We're ready to be tried before US justice system. But even that, like, they do not trust their own justice system because there is no justice. In 2000, as you know, in 2000, we have like the first 3 deaths was in 2006, and when the worst time, and those 3 deaths was actually under suspicious circumstances. And one of the former guards who actually was stationed at the night at the camp, he wrote in his book, Murder in Camp Delta, about the 3 deaths, that they were actually tortured. And I want to say, in Guantanamo, around 800 men. And until now, nobody knows exactly the exact number of prisoners in Guantanamo, because still the government had a lot of information. Around 800 men, and I can tell you, I have been telling the people that the youngest prisoner was only few months old. And my lawyers and my brother said, you have to be careful about that. Nobody would believe you. They said, you're making up stories. So I will show you something here. And I confirmed that information about the child who was in Guantanamo with a few prisoners. And they said, yeah, we remember his father was with us and he used to go to visit his son every 2 weeks. So, and last month I was in London and I found this book by Cage, which talk about, they collected some testimonies from prisoners who were released at early years. And I found one of the prisoners actually testified that he said there was a child who was only 10 months old. So I was so happy. I was on the plane. I was reading. I was so happy because I said, okay, that's actually back what I was saying. Because as you know, Guantanamo, one of the most secretive prisons in the world, and there is a lot of information. And I can't trust me, there is 9 brothers died there, but I can tell you the number is more than that. But we cannot say more because we don't want to put ourselves in a position that like they are lying. Everything we try to say is fact checking, and so on. And before we say anything, we have to confirm with multiple brothers, even lawyers, or even like some people, guards who work at the camp. There was like, as I told you, around 800 men, 15 nationalities, more than 20 languages spoken. We had around 60 children with us in the detention, all Muslims. And you have all kind of mindset. You have doctors, nurses, engineers, teachers, professors. There was some Al-Qaeda, some Taliban fighters. But the majority of the prisoners, I can tell you around, like the majority, I can tell you like maybe 95%, they have no connection to Al-Qaeda or Taliban whatsoever. And that information is not my information. It was published by Brown University of the War Project Report, by Seton Hall University, also by ACLU. They stated that 80s.
Excuse me. Yes, I have read that Seton Hall paper. For those that would like to know more about it, it's called Guantanamo, America's Battle Lab. And earlier, Mr. Adayfi referenced the experimentation that was done on prisoners, and that is documented in that Seton Hall Law School paper. I'd also like to mention as well that many, as he is saying, many of the men, women, and children that were detained, like at Abu Ghraib that you mentioned, and other black sites, are now, even the U.S. government itself concedes, were not criminals. And the way that some of this came about was bounties were put out to basically just bring them people, and they labeled them terrorists, and then supposedly the worst of the worst were transferred to Guantanamo, and now we know that that's not true. Some 800 people were held, and only a handful have ever even been charged.
Charged or convicted. You know, one of the cases now they struggle with when it comes to conviction, and there was a guy who was working as Al-Qaeda media officer, and they convicted him in 2008 and they charged him with war crimes and conspiracy and so on. Later on, the government actually dropped those charges, and after they already convicted someone, and now they have problem with this person. They need to have a deal with him. They want, like, okay, you know, they don't want to say we made a mistake, we'll convict you with these convictions, or they like war crime and so on. And it's kind of like, honestly, there is no justice system, you know, like the whole military commissions, the whole thing is just based on have no legal basis, no justice system whatsoever. It was actually created by the government, which allowed the government to use confession under torture, evidence obtained after torture, even a statement by people who were tortured, and so on. Also, the government can use classified evidence. Even the lawyers of the defendants have no right. They cannot even look at those evidence. So it is really broken system. And as you said, the ACLU also reported that 86 prisoners of the were either mistaken identity or sold for bounties until that day. So one of the group who was released yesterday, one of them actually, when he was sold to the CIA by Pakistani government, he was at least 16 years old. He was what they call it rendered. He was kidnapped and taken to torture for a year in Jordan in black site. Then he was taken to Afghanistan, where he spent almost like 2 or 3 years in the black site. Then he was brought to Guantanamo. And when I met him in Guantanamo, I was, how old were you when he said, like, was it 16 years old? And he just got released yesterday. And so in 2009, as you know, like almost like over 440 some prisoners were released during George W. Bush, because they realized that we didn't have the people they thought they had. Even I remember I was reading an article when the arms filled. He said those prisoners of Guantanamo, most of them are actually dirt farmers. They have no values. They recognize that, but they don't want to tell the people that we did. Like I was told myself, they said we cannot say we detained an innocent man for 15 years. Simple as that. Well, we thought he was something, but he was not.
So you're detained, you're put in a black site, you're transferred somewhere you don't even know where you are. You're tortured routinely, and this goes on for 14 years before you're relocated to a nation that you don't know anything about. How does a person go on with life with that kind of injustice and trauma?
Well, Jack, I have been studying my studies around Guantanamo, my study, my work, my research, I have dedicated my life to advocate for the release of the prisoners at the closure of Guantanamo. And I can tell you, life after Guantanamo, for many, many, many cases, it is like Guantanamo, we call it Guantanamo 2.0. In some cases, brother call it like Camp 8, which actually in 2021, I finished my bachelor degree, alhamdulillah, and my thesis was about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees into social life and the labor market. So I interviewed around 250 former prisoners and many countries in different countries. And in many cases in different countries, there's a lot of challenges, difficulties, problems. In some cases, prisoners were released to countries like Kazakhstan and other countries where they died simply because, for example, Asman Khalaki, he was released in 2014 to Kazakhstan, and he died 3 months later because he had gout and he had kidney problems. And the Kazakhstani government refused to provide him with healthcare, and he ended up dying. And even after his death, they refused to send his body home. They refused to allow his family to attend his funeral. And it was buried by the Secret Service in somewhere in some cemetery in Kazakhstan until today. And some cases were prisoners sent to countries where they have no legal status until now. In some countries where prisoners end up in prison, like the United Arab Emirates, there was like 18 Yemeni, 3 Afghani, or 4 Afghanis, and a Russian were sent there. And they were in prison for 5-6 years. They were also tortured and abused, and eventually they were sent back to Yemen, thrown there, and again where they imprisoned and interrogated and so on. It's because there was no accountability. There is once you're released from Guantanamo, there is no responsibility. The government gets, okay, we'll release you, we finish with you. So, and you have cases like in Albania now. Some prisoners were released in 2006, and until now they have no legal status. And in like many cases, if you are lucky, the one who was sent to Western Europe, like Germany, like Ireland, like Slovakia, they because the system there, the government, the support, the social support, and so on. Those people managed to build their life. They managed to have families, kids, and so on. One of the best cases we thought was Oman, where Oman actually the United States sent around 28 Yemenis and 4 Afghanis to Oman, and they spent 10 years there. They established a good life. They have families, jobs. They were stable until last year, January. The Omani government came to them and they said, "Okay, you have to leave the country within 2 weeks." Why? They said, "Well, you have to leave. That's it." And there was no explanation. There is no reason. And they all expelled back to Yemen. I mean, like, whenever you are released, you have no legal status. There is always uncertainty. You could be expelled at any time. And I think can happen to any of us. So, and some people found their names in the Interpol list. Some of them like couldn't get a visa, no bank account, no jobs, living in the stigma of Guantanamo. And it has been really challenging. Also, the lack of support. Once you are released from Guantanamo, there is no rehabilitation or integration program. There is no therapy. There is no network of support, especially if you are resettled or sent to a third country where you have no families, no friends, no network of support, and you don't know the language. Plus, there is a between 15 to 23 years gap in your life, and you have no set of skill that you can survive. Plus, the mental, the psychological, the physical problem you have. So like that what we call it Guantanamo 2.0. Plus, the only things, you are being surveilled, monitored, harassed, and in many cases. So we established a program with some lawyers and some NGOs in the United States. Program. It's not a rehabilitation or an integration program. It's a program called Guantanamo Survivors Fund. What we do, we try to raise some fund and help those who have difficulties, especially the one who recently released. We interview them and we make sure that everything goes according to the United States law. And we will interview them, try to help them. Some of them to get like a vocational training. In many cases, we support them in medical care because they don't have any kind of medical care or they don't have clothing. And sometimes we support to get like legal assistance because some of them end up like one of the cases, Said Bakush spent 20 years in Guantanamo. When he was released to Algeria, he was asked to sign a paper to admit that he was part of terrorist group. He's refused. They sentenced him to 3 years. So we had to find a lawyer, and we managed to reverse the case. We managed to release him. But when you are released, some of the prisoners, when they were released, there was no families. Most of their family died. There's no support at all. So that we're trying from time to time, trying to raise some fund and try to help them. And we managed to support it until now. We managed to support like 38 cases and to get like some of them would buy like small truck, and some of them would get like some vocational training, like get a course in driving or fixing some mobile phone and so on. It's really basic, and it is really individual effort by some NGOs and some lawyers, including myself.
Good
so this kind of like when you talk about life after Guantanamo, it is really, really, really challenging, really hard and difficult. Still, yeah, because when I was talking to nobody wants to be known he was in Guantanamo. In many cases, you cannot even get married. Bank account closed. You cannot just get a job and so on. And last week, I was talking to a brother who was released to Georgia in 2009. And after the revolution, he went back to Tunisia. When he went back, he spent 10 years under house arrest. He couldn't work. And anytime he would rent a house or try to get like a room with him for his wife and kids, the Secret Service would come to the landlord and would tell them, don't rent a room for him. And just 2 weeks ago, he charged the government and they actually left he cannot travel. They said, okay, now no more house arrest, but it is really hard and difficult when the government actually make those obstacles and difficulties and challenges for the former Guantanamo prisoners. And there is no responsibility. There is no accountability. There is no, United States does not want to get involved in those cases. Not at all.
Yes, I am sure a lot of my fellow countrymen don't know the extent of it. Even as much as it's been on the news, as much coverage as there's been, it's disturbing. People don't like to hear about this, and the work you're doing is very admirable. Congratulations on getting your master's. That's incredible. Art has been a big part of your life, and some of the prisoners coped and used it as a survival skill. And you've had the opportunity to tour with exhibits of the prisoners' art. I think last year you went to the European Parliament in Brussels, and
Yeah,
you just got back from, is it Ireland? Is that
yeah.
correct?
Belfast from north of Ireland.
Tell us about the exhibit and what it's like to tour with it.
Well, honestly, like the art from Guantanamo is really an important part of Guantanamo and our life and Guantanamo story. And I remember the very early days when we tried to create art. It was you cannot. We used the styrofoams, clamshells, cups, and that was we were punished. Was forbidden. We were not allowed to have any pen or papers for years and years until Obama took office in 2009. But this kind of like another form of arts. We dance, we sang, we had poetry, we had like telling stories and so on. We tried to survive. So in 2010, I remember 2009 when we were negotiating with the camp administration about the living condition, the prison, we requested art class. And the camp commander said, "You guys are terrorists. You don't know how to paint." So we had to use the pen and paper to convince them that we can't paint. We just need an art class. And when we started the art class, it was full. And I remember when we started painting the things we missed most.
Sure.
Not being able to see the sky, the beautiful blue sky, not to be able to see the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, because you are moving from solitary confinement or from your cage to a rickyard, you see nothing green and everything is covered and years and years. So we started painting this kind of stars, and the art actually played an important role in our survival. It was a way to cope, a way to heal, a way also to connect to yourself, to your memories, to the world outside. It was a way to escape. And even the administration at Guantanamo, they created one room as a gallery to show the tours and the journalists that
Wow.
we are treating them well. Yeah, they said we treat them look like we give them art classes and so on. So during from 2010 2013, we call it the golden age, where we had peacetime and the living condition improved in the military prison. We had newspaper, books, we had video phone calls, we had classes, art class, and we focused, and especially me also, like, and others, we focused on ourselves because when I thought was the best way, like, because I didn't want to be that person in the prison the rest of my life. I was scared of myself. I have no background of education. But I become like an angry man because
I
the
can't
the
even imagine. I
yeah,
can't even.
so we started focus like learning English and learning how to paint, and it actually brought some peace. It helped us to calm down. It give you something to focus in, give you sense of agency, sense of control. It was also keeping art wasn't easy because most of the time the art would get confiscated, disappear. Sometime it's not one the government or the administration won't approve the art for some reason. But we managed during Obama to send a lot of artwork to our family, to our lawyers, and so on. So in 2017, with Aaron Thompson and with my lawyer Beth Jacob, we exhibit the first art exhibition at John Jay College. I think you remember that. And the Pentagon actually reacted. They said they will burn art from Guantanamo, and that created some clashback. And that time, 2017, Biden administration banned art from leaving Guantanamo, and I was always would have this kind of a photo which like free the art from Guantanamo. So, and it was, I had it somewhere. So we spent years and years trying to get the art released from Guantanamo because people now can see through the art because it humanized the prisoners, it humanized the people who was in Guantanamo and not encountering the government narrative. And they did like that. So we managed to create also other exhibitions in Chicago and other places in the United States. And as you see, as you said last year, I managed to create and organize art at the European Parliament. Also here in Belgrade, last year in November, I also organized an art exhibition here. It was really amazing. And the arts, art in general is powerful. It's source language, and people can look into the artwork, especially Muad Shib. He's one of the people who were released yesterday. He created we did also documentary about his Shib. He created Guantanamo, and we are planning to organize more exhibitions, inshallah, soon. And this month there is exhibition in France just for Sabri Al Qurashi, one of the artists. It's be I think from the 23rd to the 26th. So it is one of the way to tell Guantanamo story, and at the same time, it's important testimony about Guantanamo, about the prisoners, and so on.
Sure, sure. I have images of a couple of your paintings. Would it be okay if I pull them up and you tell us about them?
Yeah, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Let's see.
So when they banned the art from Guantanamo, I put some together and I would protest that way for the captive art. From 2017, I would do that until 2023, until eventually they approve art for the prisoners, because arts, I consider it one of us, like a living being. It's not just like painting or colors. It's just one of us, actually,
Sure.
born from the ordeal, survived, and yeah.
Sure.
So like, okay, yeah. This
Yes.
painting,
Tell us about this one.
Well, this one in 2013 we had really hunger strike and force feeding, and they took me to the BHU unit, what they like behavioral health unit. Basically, it's like where psychiatrists function, because there was a hunger strike for almost like 36 days. They said that I want to kill myself. I have like mental issues. What they told me. So like basically, if you go on hunger strike, you get punished, and you get also punished by the administration and also punished by psychologists, because they said, well, because you're on hunger strike, that means you are suicidal. And I was like, no.
See.
So I told them, but no, I'm not suicidal. I'm protesting. They said, no, you're trying to kill yourself. I mean, they use it a way to torture you, to force you to break a hunger strike. So I spent 56 days only on water, and they gave me the IVs. So when you go on hunger strike, actually, it's really slow and painful journey toward that. So sometimes I was set that way because they would strip me naked totally. I leave me in a cell totally naked, cold AC. So I would sit that way, and it's me who was sitting that way. Like you can see my hands
I
on my head,
understand. Yeah.
and I could see that the sky is falling over my head, and as you see, like I was skeleton. I have no meat on my body, so totally naked, and that was like the way I felt when I was in hunger strike and force feeding.
I understand. Thank you for sharing that. Here is another of your works.
Yeah, this is the blue beautiful sky. I mean, this is kind of one of the scenes we missed, at not to see the sky, not to see the cloud, not to see anything. It's kind of like something you need to see, something you miss, something part of your life, a part of your memory, and it also gives some kind of hope too. So no matter how it gets dark, there is always hope.
Yes, yes. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you. And we're coming up on the 23rd year since Guantanamo detention camps opened in 2002. And you'll be speaking at a Cage International event.
Yeah, I mean, like as you know, Cage, actually Cage organization was established because of Guantanamo and 2000, I think 3 or 2002, tried to advocate for the prisoner of Guantanamo and was one of the first organization who actually published the prisoners' names. So Guantanamo had the project of Guantanamo Project. I work as Guantanamo Project Coordinator, and they do every year campaigning, calling for the closure, bring awareness. And again, because Guantanamo, many people think Guantanamo has been closed, yet still open. So I will speak at the event of the 11th of January, 6 p.m. UK time, and I think you have a link. You can also post the link for the people who want
I will do
to
that.
watch. So yeah, it is important because to keep reminding ourselves and reminding the world about the Guantanamo. Guantanamo becomes a symbol of it becomes a symbol of injustice, lawlessness, abuse of power, symbol of torture, and indefinite detention. And as you see now, almost 5 administration, yeah, or 4 administration, like none of them actually managed to close Guantanamo, which easily could be closed, but there is no political will. It actually turned to be a political battle between the Republicans and the Democrats. And even now, when the Biden administration would release prisoner, they tried to keep the release under the table, make publicity, because they are like they don't want to the Republican to use this against them. So in Guantanamo itself, even if you talk to George W. Bush, the one who started it, he's like, it is wrong. And it is wrong. Like you cannot just create a place outside of the legal system and indefinitely imprison people, torturing, abuse them. And you say, I mean, like, and I believe that I can tell you, alhamdulillah, many Americans who actually support our work and a lot of my friends are Americans who actually work on the getting Guantanamo closed, releasing the prisoners, and many other people around the world. People still don't. I found that people still don't know about Guantanamo. So we held this kind of events like uh, now and then, and publishing articles talking about it, event reviews, and actually I'm in a campaign with K to close Guantanamo. And as you see, I was in London, I was in Belfast, talk about Guantanamo and so on. Alhamdulillah, I have also published 2 books. The first one was published in 2021. It's Don't Forget Us Here. The second one was published last year in May, called Letters from Guantanamo. So with that, we're trying to push for the closure of Guantanamo, which is really important, but also, closing Guantanamo is not just shutting down the physical place. For us, closing Guantanamo means the United States must acknowledge what happened at Guantanamo, and that there must be some kind of official apology to the victims and compensation and accountability. Without accountability, we cannot say Guantanamo is closed. And what's the point of closing Guantanamo without accountability? Because some of the interrogators who interrogate us and torture us at Guantanamo, they also tortured prisoners during the Vietnam War, and they torture prisoners in Guantanamo. Then they went to Iraq and tortured prisoners there, because there was no accountability. There was people like immune to whatever the crime they committed. So also there is a lot of people who were working on Guantanamo case, like Witness Against Torture, CCR, and also Andy Worthington, one of the really leading voices for the closure of Guantanamo. And I would like to thank everyone, every single one who is working and helping and supporting this cause, because we have a lot of work to do until we get the prison closed and eventually accountability.
Yes, yes. And you're right. At this point, as important as it is to close it's still at this point just a symbol, even of, in my personal opinion, a milestone in the injustice was when the United States approved detainment without charges, indefinite incarceration without charges. It just goes against every principle of human rights and the legal system to hold someone indefinitely. And I recall when Guantanamo detainees even needed legal representation to be told what they were accused of doing. There was a point in time that the detainees were not even told what charges they were being investigated about. It's actually kind of just it's why so many Americans and I'm sure other people around the world just avert from it. It's so disturbing to think about that we tend to look for excuses or reasons it's not as bad as it sounds. And again and again and again, we see people that were there, detainees, officers, former intelligence officials that tell us, yes, it was as bad as it sounds. And is there anything else you'd like to tell us about that you think is important for people to know about you or about Guantanamo or anything at all, Mansoor?
Well, like last word, we need people to join us the campaign to join the campaign to close Guantanamo and the call for accountability. This is really an important call because it is, if we let it go, let it happen, is going to be created in many. It's already created in many places around the world. As I think you remember when Trump in 2019 suggested that undocumented migrants should be classified as an incombatant and sent to Guantanamo. And now, he, as in his campaign, said he would deport undocumented migrant. That means there will be a lot of arrest, a lot of deportation, a lot of abuses, a lot of mistreatment, and so on. So why Guantanamo is important? It's an important case because just to break this vicious cycle, people must be held accountable. And we need to call for the closure of Guantanamo and accountability. This is really, really important. And we are seeking justice for anyone. Anyone who commits any crime, they should be faced justice. They should be tried according to the law, to the United States justice system. And if anyone does have been wrong, they should be compensated. There should be accountability and so on. Yeah, this is my message. And wait for my next book, Life After Guantanamo. Inshallah, will be this year or next year. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that you had time to join me, and thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Yeah, thank you so much.